It's a technical miracle. That's what some are calling it. Others, they're calling it lag central. The brand new, highly anticipated Nintendo Switch 2 has finally arrived, heralding a new era of gaming on the go. But its flagship launch title, the sprawling adventure Donkey Kong Bananza, is already revealing deep cracks in the foundation of Nintendo's new hardware. Players who were promised a revolutionary experience are now sounding the alarm, reporting that the game pushes the console so far past its limits that it begins to crumble under its own ambition. So what is the truth? Is this a case of a groundbreaking game being too advanced for its own good? Or has Nintendo released a console that was underpowered from day one? Today, we are tunneling deep into the controversy surrounding Donkey Kong Bananza. We'll expose the shocking player reports that detail a journey from 60 frames per second bliss to a stuttering, unplayable nightmare. We will pinpoint the exact moments and mechanics that are causing the Switch 2 to buckle, and we will unpack the great debate raging within the community. Is this an acceptable sacrifice for innovation or a major misstep from the gaming giant? This isn't just a story about one game, it's a story about the future of Nintendo itself. Let's not forget the context here. The original Nintendo Switch was a phenomenon, a bolt of lightning that redefined console gaming. But for all its brilliance, it was always dogged by whispers about its power. Games like The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, while masterpieces, had noticeable frame drops in busy areas. Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity famously turned into a slideshow at times. The promise of the Switch 2 wasn't just more games, it was the promise of a better experience, a future where Nintendo's boundless creativity would no longer be shackled by dated technology. This new console was meant to be the final, definitive answer to the question of power. And that's what makes the situation with Donkey Kong Bananza so utterly explosive. For months, the hype was astronomical. Leaks and reports painted a picture of a machine roughly on par with an Xbox Series S, a significant leap that would finally allow Nintendo to play in the same graphical ballpark as its competitors. And the game chosen to showcase this newfound power was Donkey Kong Bananza, a title that promised a truly next-generation feature, a world that was almost entirely, granularly destructible. To truly grasp the scale of this ambition, you need to understand just how different this is from normal game design. For decades, video game worlds have been beautiful, elaborate sets. They look solid, but they're hollow. You can only go where the developer has built a path. Voxel technology throws that rulebook out the window. Think of it less like a painting and more like a mountain-sized block of digital clay. Every single point in space has substance. If you want to tunnel straight down for a mile, you can. If you want to carve your own fortress out of a cliffside, you can. But this freedom comes at a staggering computational cost. The console isn't just displaying a static image, it's constantly tracking the state and position of billions of individual points, calculating physics, lighting, and object interactions in real time for a world that the player can fundamentally alter at any second. It's a technology that has brought even the most powerful gaming PCs to their knees, and Nintendo decided to make it the centerpiece of their new handheld. The initial impressions were frankly breathtaking. Players booting up the game for the first time were met with a vibrant, seamless world. As one user on the Switch 2 subreddit, Ferniferous_Fern, described their initial hours, it was pure magic. They wrote, "When DK Bananza first came out, I didn't have any frame rate issues, not one. Sublayer after sublayer went by, fight after fight, 900, 1000, 1100, nothing. This was the dream. This was the promise of the Switch 2 fulfilled. Players carved their own paths through dense jungles, unearthed ancient secrets by literally digging them out of the earth, and engaged in massive battles without a single dropped frame." The console, it seemed, was handling this immense technological challenge with grace. But then, players started reaching the end. They reached the final, climactic confrontation, the void fight. And that's when the miracle began to look like a mirage. Ferniferous_Fern continued their story with a dramatic turn. "Then I got to the final void fight, lag, central. From that point on, everything had frame rate problems until post-game. Suddenly, the buttery smooth gameplay vanished, replaced by a slideshow. The epic final battle was reduced to a chugging, stuttering mess, turning a moment of triumph into one of pure frustration. And it wasn't an isolated incident. This single post garnered nearly 500 upvotes and almost 200 comments, with a chorus of players echoing the same sentiment. The honeymoon was over. The game and the console had hit a wall. It became clear that the game's performance was a house of cards, and the final boss fight was the gust of wind that blew it all down. The Reddit thread became a support group for frustrated players. One user detailed how they had spent hours creating an intricate network of tunnels, only to have the game's performance permanently degrade in that entire region, as if the console simply couldn't remember the complex changes they had made to the world. Another spoke of the joy of setting off huge, explosive chain reactions, a key feature shown in trailers, only for that joy to turn to ash as the game froze for several seconds before continuing at a crawl, completely ruining the spectacle. The dream of a fully dynamic world was colliding with the harsh reality of hardware limits, and the result was an experience that felt unpredictable and, at its worst, broken. The community quickly began to crowdsource a list of other performance-breaking moments. User BobWade_22 pointed out that the simple act of building bridges using a specific blue material would cause the game to lag to a crawl, as if the console simply couldn't compute the physics of the newly created structure. Another user, Rafflechief, noted that the frame rate would consistently plummet every single time they opened the in-game menu, a basic function that should be effortless for any modern hardware. This suggested the problem wasn't just with the big, explosive moments, but was woven into the very fabric of the game's code. Rafflechief also added a poignant observation, stating they sometimes forget that many Nintendo gamers aren't accustomed to demanding high and stable frame rates, hinting that the problem might be even more widespread than reported, with many players simply not noticing or not caring about technical shortcomings they've come to accept as the Nintendo standard. This is a truly staggering collection of issues for a flagship title on a new piece of hardware. If you've ever felt that jolt of frustration when a game you're loving suddenly starts to stutter and lag, destroying your immersion, go ahead and hit that like button. It seems the players of Donkey Kong Bananza are feeling that pain on a massive scale. The theories began to fly. What was happening under the hood? User Steel_Ketchup89 posited that Nintendo, fully aware of the hardware's limitations, had made some serious compromises. They suggested that the most intense fights in the game were intentionally capped at a lower 30 frames per second, a classic trick developers use to maintain stability when the action gets too heated. It seemed like Nintendo needed to make some serious concessions to get those crazy fights to work, they wrote. This theory implies that Nintendo knew their grand vision for Bonanza was too much for the Switch 2, and instead of scaling back the vision, they chose to sacrifice performance, hoping players wouldn't notice. This brings us to the heart of the matter, the voxel technology itself. This is an immense computational load, far greater than rendering a static environment. It's a task that would challenge even high-end PCs, let alone a portable console. And this is where the Switch 2's reported power level, similar to an Xbox Series S, becomes so critical. While a leap for Nintendo, the Series S is itself a console built on compromise, designed for lower-resolution gaming and lacking the raw power of its big brother, the Series X or the PlayStation 5. Nintendo, in its quest for innovation, tasked this mid-range hardware with a high-end experimental workload. The result? A game that is breathtakingly ambitious but teeters constantly on the brink of technical collapse. However, the story isn't entirely one of doom and gloom. Amidst the sea of complaints, a fascinating counter-narrative emerged. A player by the name of Aldi Not Aldis shared a completely different experience, writing, "I played exclusively handheld and almost never noticed frame rate issues other than with Void's battle. I guess it's the VRR in handheld doing its thing." This is a huge revelation. VRR, or variable refresh rate, is a screen technology that allows the display's refresh rate to sync with the game's frame rate in real time. This smooths out the perception of frame drops, making a game that's fluctuating between, say, 45 and 55 frames per second feel much less jarring than it would on a fixed 60 Hz television screen. This suggests the docked experience, where players connect the Switch 2 to a TV, is where the problems are most severe. Playing in handheld mode with its smaller, lower-resolution screen and advanced VRR technology offers a demonstrably smoother ride. The console is rendering fewer pixels, freeing up precious processing power, and the screen technology is helping to mask the inevitable dips. This discovery adds a crucial layer of nuance to the debate. And it wasn't the only defense of Nintendo's approach. Let's be fair to the critics for a moment. The gaming landscape in 2024 is vastly different from when the original Switch launched. On PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, players have become accustomed to choice. They expect performance modes that guarantee a smooth 60 frames per second, even if it means sacrificing some visual fidelity. They expect a baseline of technical stability for their money. For $450, is it unreasonable to demand that the console's premier launch title runs without crippling slowdown? For this camp, the argument isn't about photorealism, it's about playability. The most innovative game mechanic in the world is worthless if the frame rate is so low that the game becomes a frustrating, unresponsive chore. The Nintendo standard of accepting technical flaws, they argue, is an outdated excuse that doesn't hold up in the modern market. On the flip side, the defenders are championing a tradition that is as old as Nintendo itself. This is the company that gave us Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, a game that achieved three-dimensional graphics on a 16-bit system by literally putting a coprocessor, the Super FX chip, inside the cartridge. It was a hack, a brilliant workaround that pushed the hardware far beyond its intended limits. They did it again with the Nintendo 64, creating vast three-dimensional worlds in games like Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time on a console with notoriously limited memory. This legacy is built on a simple, powerful idea: the experience is king. If achieving a revolutionary new form of gameplay means the frame rate dips during a massive explosion, so be it. That's the price of innovation. For these players, the stutters in Donkey Kong Bananza aren't a flaw, they are battle scars, proof that the developers fought tooth and nail against the hardware to deliver something truly special and new. This brings us to the classic argument from user conflict potential_204. A Switch 2 is not a $3,000 PC, it's a $450 tablet. It's a technical miracle that Nintendo is able to make games like this run at all. So, the community is now split into two camps. On one side, you have those who see the performance issues as an unacceptable flaw in a premium product. On the other, you have those who see it as a triumph of software engineering, pushing affordable hardware to its absolute limit. So, where do you fall in this debate? Is it a technical marvel or a technical mess? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're finding this deep dive into the guts of the Switch 2 fascinating, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what we uncover next. Ultimately, the story of Donkey Kong Bananza and its performance woes is more than just a review of a single game. It's a microcosm of the entire challenge facing Nintendo in this new generation. It confirms their long-standing philosophy of prioritizing innovation over power is still firmly in place. They are still committed to creating games that push boundaries, even if it means pushing their own hardware past the breaking point. The question that remains is whether this strategy can succeed in an era where player expectations for technical performance are higher than ever. Will the magic of Nintendo's game design continue to outweigh the frustrations of its hardware limitations? Or will players eventually tire of paying a premium for experiences that feel compromised? The fate of Donkey Kong Bananza, and indeed the entire Nintendo Switch 2, may very well hang on the answer.